Hello friends, good afternoon, and in this session we are going to learn about how we can create the Azure Service Principal. Azure Service Principal is the basic and necessary thing for integrating the CPG module to the Azure cloud. Why? Because this Azure Service Principal is playing a role of a credentials. So whenever any of the request of API from the CPG module, a ServiceNow CPG module to the Azure, it will be get authenticated and authorized using the Azure Service Principal. So it works like authentication method, and it will help us in terms of accessing all the resources and all the CIs within the Azure. This will help us to bring all the information based on the API into the ServiceNow CMDB. If you do not have any specific Azure environment, you can also create a free Azure account for the testing purpose, and you will also get the ServiceNow demo instance which we can use to integrate or test these particular features. Azure subscription for the testing purpose is completely free, and anyone can use that with the simple credit card which you need to configure while creating the Azure account. That will not deduct any kind of money from your account, specifically a major. It is just 1 or 2 rupees they will deduct for the verification, and they will return back. And also until your confirmation that they will not going to extend the or upgrade the Azure, and it will not deduct any money from your credit card. So it is safe to configure that, and you can leverage the benefit of free account from the Azure. Here you just need to click on the Azure directory, and once you click on the Azure directory, you can see this tenant ID. We called it as a directory ID as well. Okay, and these are all the options you can see inside the directory. So there you can find the option app registration. You need to click on the app registration, which will ask you for the name of the application. So this is the application which will have the access to the Azure resources, and this will create a pipe between the credentials, Azure Service Principal credentials, and the Azure resources. So this application will have the access inside the Azure application, and this application will help us with the different options like single tenant, multi-tenant, and all. So we can create a separate directory or multiple directories, or we can have the single directory as well as an option to create this particular application. If you are a newcomer or if you do not have specific requirement, you can go ahead with the default directory and the simple single tenant application registration. This will also ask you for the redirect URL in terms of how it is behaving or interacting with the specific applications. So you can choose here the web options, and you can put the ServiceNow URL. Since we are doing this for the ServiceNow integration or CPG integration, we can simply put our environment URL here. Yeah, after configuring this particular URL or mentioning the URL, you are done with creating the application. You can just click on the register, and your application will be created into the Azure directory. Okay, you can see the message that application is created, and these are the information which is from the application. Okay, so you can see the application ID, which is also called as a client ID, and you can also have the object ID of this particular application. So important thing is that client ID you need to configure in ServiceNow as well. So make sure you have noting this down, this particular client ID. You also required that directory ID which you are referring to, or the default directory which we have used. Now the next step is we need to create a client secret, or the secret key and secret code which is going to be used into the ServiceNow for the authentication purpose. It's similar to a password which we are going to use, and we can create from here. We can click on the ServiceNow inside the as an application in the Azure, and we can click on add new client secret, where it will ask for the description and the expiry. Here you can put some specific date, or maybe some 3 months or 18 months, whatever is comfortable for you. You can put that expiry, and it will generate this particular value and secret ID. Make sure that this value is a important thing which we need to configure. Secret ID is not required to configure, we just need a value. So make sure we copy this value and paste it somewhere, because once we close this particular window, this value is going to be disappear and we cannot revert that back. So if we wanted to and if we mistakenly clicked on the another link and we moved out of this page, we have to recreate a new client secret. So make sure we copy this and paste it somewhere so that we can use it in our system. After completing this particular task of secret key, the next step is we need to give the role to the specific application. So now, giving role to this particular application, we need to click on the app roles, and here we can see the option as create app role. In the display name, you can give any name specific which is relevant and you can identify later on. Also, you need to give the option or allowed member types as a application. Okay, and then in the value you can either if you are only going for the discovery, reader role, reader reader role is also comfortable, and that will serve your purpose. But if you are going to use this particular configuration or the service principal for other tasks, like for example, if you are using for creation of the resources into the Azure, like a workspace, or maybe if you are looking for the virtual machines to be created from this integration, you need to have the some specific role which is allowing this particular access. So for the safer side, or for the purpose of this integration, we can take the admin role also, which will help you to serve the purpose of creating resources inside the Azure. But make sure if you are working for a client specific assignment, you need to use the specific role which is created and which will have only the required access here. Okay, so you can for the time being we can use the admin here, and we can put the description why we required this particular role, and after completing that you can, like if you want to enable this app role, then you can click on checkbox and click on apply. Okay, so this will create that role, and this role is now mapped with our application. So we created a directory, inside directory we create an application, and inside application we have created the secret key and the app role. Okay, so after completing all these steps, we are good with the particular applications. Now the next step is we need to configure that tenant ID, which is a directory ID, also the application ID and the secret key value. So all these three things we need to configure into the service now. So that is our next step. We are done with creating the service principal. Now this service principal credential we need to configure inside the ServiceNow, so that whenever we perform any action inside the ServiceNow, and it will be able to reach to the particular application inside the Azure. So here we are logging into the particular ServiceNow instance with our admin credentials. Okay. Now the next step is we need to navigate for the credential table, and in this credential table we have to create the particular credentials of the service principal. Now you can see we have created this particular service credentials, service principal, and here you can see that we have the client ID and the tenant ID which is configured here, also the secret key value. Okay, make sure it is a secret key value and not the secret ID. Okay, and here we can see that all the discovery affinity will be populated here. And we are done with this particular configuration in terms of service principal configuration and configuring that service principal into the ServiceNow. Okay, now the next step is we need to look for the mid server configuration, which we are going to learn in the next session.